If you talk to someone who was not born in America or who has spent any length of time in a foreign country, they are more fearful of what's happening in our woke culture than those of us who were born and raised here can understand. I've talked to many of those individuals, and they tell us the same story of fear and apprehension, because they will tell us that what they're seeing now in the United States is what they escaped from when they came to this land. So the testimony you'll hear today is from a member of our church, and I assure you there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others who are in our family who would share the same testimony with us. So listen.
I lived in Houston for 22 years. I fled from China, but I cannot show my face because I'm concerned of my family's safety back in China. In that region, you do not have any freedom, you do not have any choice, you don't have a free speech, you don't have a free religions, and we have churches, but those church leaders, they are Communist Party member. If you have a Bible study, which is unauthorized, they consider that's a crime. You can be arrested. And I came to the United States just for not only freedom and all for the American dream and a fair chance. And this country has become more and more like communist. I can see what's happening here now, and which this country is getting divided. That's not what I wanted to see this country become. As Americans, I think we should wake up now. We should see the big picture, what is coming. We cannot be influenced by the social media and by the media, what they told us. And we have to use our critical thinking to see the truth, to dig a little bit, to spend a little more time and focus on what's going on. As Christians, we also called to stand up, to face the evil, to fight with the devil, and to not be silenced in front of evil. And that's what we're supposed to do as a Christian now.
What do you think? When I think of freedom, my mind immediately goes to Lady Liberty, there in the New York Harbor. It's the Statue of Liberty that we look at and we can see now. And it stands for freedom. What do you have in the statue? You have the right hand, Lady Liberty, up with a light. You have the left hand, you have July the 4th, 1776. At the foot of Lady Liberty, you have chains, and you have other examples of how people came to get away from the shackles and the chains that you see there at her feet. The dream, the hope of going through Ellis Island and becoming a citizen, and then that invitation, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. That's who we are as citizens of the United States of America, and there is not another country on the planet where you can do that. Dr. Martin Luther King, I quoted what he said at Southern Methodist University about 2 years before he was assassinated, and I repeat it now. He said, as long as One race feels they're superior to another race, whether it's the blacks who are prejudiced toward the whites, or the whites are prejudiced toward the black, or any other nationality. He said that nation cannot be free. And I agree with that 100%. So let's look at freedom. Let's look at freedom. We see how in the world, for so very long, were the words from pulpits like this all over America talked about the curse of Ham on the African American race. Oh, yeah. For over 100 years, a lot of pastors, a lot of seminaries taught that Genesis chapter 9 was a curse on Ham, and therefore that was a rationale for keeping those who had darker pigments of skin as a permanent classification of slavery inferior to everybody else. That was taught. And that made those, quote, Christians, end quote, slave owners feel like, well, this is the way God has designed it because of the curse of Ham. But you look at that chapter, you see Ham was not cursed. Ham was guilty of a sin with his father, and God cursed Canaan, who was a son of Ham, and know that curse was legitimate. Look at the history of the Canaanites. Immorality, bestiality, murder, crime, that was the Canaanites. They certainly had that evil heart within them, but not on Ham. That is illegitimate. You can trace the etymology of the word Ham. It has nothing to do with color or race. It's been traced in all of Hebrew history and etymology, and it's not there. But that has been proclaimed in order to keep one branch of our society down, and therefore they came not seeking freedom, they came in shackles. And that's the evil in which our nation is a part of, and that is our history, and it is crazy theology. That's not taught in the Bible, period. So therefore, there is that feeling of, oh, I'm superior. Now flip it over. For 2 decades, in the City College of New York, a man by the name of Leonard Jeffries, who was a professor, who started black studies in that college, he taught for more than 2 decades that there was an ice people and a sun people. And the ice people had lighter pigmentations, and they came out of the cave, got no sunlight, therefore they were light in color. And this professor taught that ice people were inferior, they had no soul, only thing they could do would be to oppress other people, and they ought to be eliminated from the earth because they were demonic. That was ice people, the cave. Oh, but another classification was sun people. And they had a darker pigmentation, and they were born by the side of the ocean or the creek or the sea, and therefore they were enlightened, they were soul, they had a soul, they were moral, they were gifted, and far superior, the sun people were the ice people. So that's the other side of the coin. And that is crazy anthropology. So you got crazy theology on one side, crazy anthropology on the other side, and we know that, thank God, we are one in Him, and the melanin in your face doesn't mean a thing in the world. Race does not exist in the Bible and in humanity who are enlightened today under Jesus Christ. You got it? So we talk about freedom. And we immediately turn to the First Amendment to the Constitution. We have those 4 big freedoms there. But what has happened to them? Then the coronavirus, we lost which one of those freedoms first? The 4th one. Now, you would think the right of peaceful assembly would be the freedom that wouldn't count as much, but when we lost that, all of a sudden when the right of assembly was taken from the United States of America Now we didn't have freedom of religion, we have freedom from religion. We didn't have freedom of speech, we had freedom from speech. We did not have freedom of the press, we had freedom from the press. Let me elaborate on that. Freedom of religion. Do you realize at what we've been dealing with here for the past 5 weeks? Putting the woke agenda in a biblical framework, that would be classified in all of Europe, certainly in Canada, and most places of the world as hate speech. And I would be canceled, put out, perhaps jailed, because that would be hate speech trying to enunciate biblical truth in the moment of history. And therefore, there will be a cancellation of speech. There'd be a cancellation of religion. You say, well, this wouldn't happen in an enlightened country. Did you know this past week in Australia, a man was elected to be commissioner of their football league, which would be like being commissioner of NFL. He served 1 day because after they elected him to this very prestigious, highly paid position, they discovered he was a member of a Bible church, and they didn't believe in the right of abortion, in the murdering of a baby in a mother's womb, and they fired him. He served 1 day, canceled. This is where we are today. If you don't hew the line, if you don't follow everything that's there, all of our freedoms are in serious jeopardy in this hour. That's where we are. So we look at freedom, and inside of freedom, we see something else. We see liberty. What is the difference in freedom and liberty? They're used as synonyms, but there is a distinctiveness. Liberty is freedom is within freedom. In other words, I have the freedom to dance, shout. I guess I have the freedom to hit somebody, or you could. That's ultimate freedom. But in freedom, we have liberty and justice for all, right? And liberty are the rules and the regulations and the laws that help us contain a total, capricious, free world and free society. And that is liberty. And now we're in the process of losing that liberty. You know why? Because in the coronavirus, an amazing thing took place, a staggering thing took place. Science married politics. Whoa. Boy, that's a illicit union if you've ever seen one in your life. And we see when that happens, you get all kinds of mixed messages, and there is a whole realm of confusion that takes place. For example, let's just look at the cooling of the globe. You know anything about that? Oh, you've lived that long, huh? Look at the cooling headlines. This was in July the 11th, 1970, the Washington Post headline. Colder winters hail dawn of a new age. Whoa. On November 1972, Time magazine, headline, Science, Another Ice Age. In other words, all the polar ice caps are going to cover, and they're going to have another ice age. It's going to cover all the world. Oh, yeah. April the 28th, 1975, Newsweek reported, meteorologists disagree about the cause and extent of the cooling trend and specific impact on local weather conditions, but they are unanimous, science, in the view that if the climate change is to be as profound as some of the pessimists fear, the resulting famine can be catastrophic. Cooling of the planet. I was alive. Some of you may remember this. I'm not an etymologist. I'm certainly not a climatologist, but I'm an amateur historian. That was what the consensus of science said. As a result of that, an eminent professor at Stanford University said, we're going to have a food crisis and there's going to be starvation because we have too many people on the earth. The population bomb, he wrote. And boy, all the scientists said he's right on target. If the ice caps are going to begin to cover again, we're not going to have enough food in which to eat. We've got to cut down on the population. So all of a sudden, all of these pseudo-intellectuals and many billionaires, they begin to say, we've got to curb the population in China, and that's what they did, remember? And we got to curb the population in Africa. There's too much explosion there, and they put all kinds of measures to do that. And then they came to America. They said, let's have something called Planned Parenthood. By the way, the title of a lot of things isn't really what those things are about. Have you figured that out yet? And they put Planned Parenthood all around so many minority communities because they're having so many children. And now, legally, Roe v. Wade and the rest of it, children could be murdered in their mother's womb in the auspices of the wonderful title of a woman's health. Now, this is what happened because of the cooling of the planet, ladies and gentlemen. Not enough food, too many people. We got to do something about it. Whoa, what's happened now? Look at the other slide. Then cooling morphed into catastrophic warming. Look at it, May the 26th, 1990, New York Times headline, scientists urge rapid action on global warming. Whoa, man, what happened? January 19th, 2010, NBC News, now there's an authority. From 2000 to 2009, the warmest decade in history. January 22nd, 2019, USA Today, headline, Alexandria AOC Cortez, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And she said you'd have to have $63 trillion to handle climate change. I can't make that up. Now, what was the result of that? Man, all of us said the world is coming. By the way, Prince Charles got in on the act. He said the world would be ended, he picked the year in which we're living right now. Well, he was wrong. I mean, how could he be wrong when he's a prince? Now, here we are. NASA, that's right up the street, folks, those brilliant people. NASA, of peer-reviewed, that means that Keith writes something and I'm his peer and I write something. Good job, Keith. Good job, Ed. That's what peer review is, by the way, if you want to be sure. 97%, listen, of peer-reviewed scientific articles agree that global warming is human-generated. In other words, it's from fossil fuels, etc. But another scholarly work, and it is Science Education, counter NASA's claim that 97% of all scientists agree and say that they have read all these articles and only 1% of scientific articles and 0.3% of overall articles consulted endorse the hypothesis that human industry causes global warming. Man, somebody is grossly wrong. Now, let me put this in context. I read a very scholarly man, Michael Nodes. He's written a book called Speechless. He writes this about all of this. Cooling, warning, here we go. He said, perhaps warmer weather threatens civilization. Perhaps it does not. Maybe the coronavirus is an unprecedented threat to human life. Maybe not. In any event, doctor dictators, i.e. Napoleonic Dr. Fauci, expert technocrats, have no right to demand that we acquiesce to their every whim. A free people may welcome the advice of specialists, and we do, but we must also consider other non-scientific factors, including the effects of a given policy on the economy, national security, popular culture, civil rights, social relations, welfare of our children, and mental health and other facts of our republic. Even as climate change really could destroy the world by 2031, as AOC claims, Science remains the servant of our nation and of the world and a free republic, and the people must set the course. So don't say I'm on one side or the other, but I'm simply saying when science marries politics and politics appropriates millions and millions of dollars, as has already been appropriated to address, they don't say warming anymore, they say climate change. They've even changed that. To address that, where in the world does your money and my money go? We pay tax. What's happened to it? It's out in Never Never Land. That's the reason the politicians have got in with the scientists, and now we don't know who in the world to believe. Now, we lose our liberty. Remember, that's under freedom, the regulations by which we can live together. And when we lose our liberty, we've lost something that's absolutely precious and sacred to all of us. So, we look at freedom, we look at liberty, and now let's look at blessings. Yeah. America has blessed America, we said it. America is a blessed nation. Now the question is, are we still a blessed nation? People ask me that all the time. Have we lost the blessing of God, the United States? If we've lost it, can we recover it again? What does it mean for a nation to be blessed? Good question, isn't it? Where does it come from? A lot of people think it's like, remember the wonderful world of Disney? I do. When it first came on, color TV was coming into vogue. And they would open that, they would show a picture of the Disney palace, remember, on the screen. And then Tinkerbell would come with some pixie dust and throw it on the palace, and bang, color and light and music would come on. And some of y'all remember that? The wonderful world, pixie dust, bang, boom. Some people think that's how America was blessed. That God came along, looked down on America, and said, here's some pixie dust, bang, you're blessed. You think that's how it happened? Let me tell you exactly how it happened. It happened just like it did for the nation of Israel. Just like any nation, any people can be blessed, but there's a little catch in this that is big. Look at Jeremiah, chapter number 29. God is speaking to Israel. He's speaking to the United States of America. In fact, he's speaking to every nation on this earth. He says, God speaking, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare, for your blessing, and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. There is a provision, and there is an appropriation of that provision. Follow me now. Here's a provision. You're hungry, and I offer you food, and this is what you could get, but you have to appropriate that food and eat it. Here, God offers us a provision. We can come to faith in Jesus Christ and have a brand new life, but we have to appropriate that by receiving him by faith in our life. The same way with blessings. He says, I know the plans that I have for you. Then he said, but then you will call upon me. That's the appropriation. Verse 13, he said, you'll seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and I will restore your fortunes and will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord, and I'll bring you back to the place from where I sent you into exile. That's the story of Israel. That's the story of the United States of America. Why did God bless us in the beginning? It's because that we built into our fundamental documents Judeo-Christian biblical principles in all the three institutions God established. Do you remember? The family, government, and the church. And in these three institutions, when we exercise freedom and our documents' foundation are built on biblical principles, when we live in that basis, we are free and God blesses us. But we have to continue to appropriate, claim those blessings. And when we do not, God just takes his hand off your life or my life, or takes his hand off the United States of America as he took his hand off of Israel as they disobeyed him. Not pixie dust, pew. But here is what you can have with God when you appropriate it and invite it to come to be a part of your life. You see, in that situation, America can be blessed, and we're going to have to turn around and go back, and we're going to handle this godless wokeness that we have all around us today. Israel Beilein was born in Siberia. That's the backside of nowhere in Russia. Some anti-Semites, they came and they burned down his home. His dad took him and I guess another couple of siblings, and they got out of Russia and ended up on the east side of New York City. When Israel was 9 years old, his dad died. So he got on the streets, began to sell papers in order to maintain his life. Little Israel would go into bars and taverns, and he'd see those old beat-up, ting-tong pianos, whatever you call them, and he started to play the piano. He was naturally gifted. Then he began to write songs as a kid, and all those in the bars and taverns, they loved his music. It was so down to earth. It was a people's music, and this kid playing that piano, it was a marvelous thing to see, and he survived like that. And then he went and served in the military for America. And he came back home, he started writing music, and he wrote a piece of sheet music. And somehow when they put down his name, Israel Beilein, they misspelled it, and it became Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin. Isn't that something? Irving Berlin. Who's Irving Berlin? He wrote White Christmas, No Business Like Show Business, You Got Your Love, on and on. Plays Broadway. And he said, I write for the purpose of heart music. Purpose for giving music to people on this earth, to God's people. In 1938, he went to Germany and saw what was happening there with Adolf Hitler as rights and freedoms and prejudice began to rule and reign. He came back to America, and an interesting thing there. A soloist was singing on the radio, and everybody was listening to her. What was her name? What was her name? Kate Smith. And Kate Smith contacted Irving Berlin and said, I want you to write me a song. Write me a song that I can sing on the radio. And he thought what he could write. And he remembered what he had written when he was in the army away from America. He said, I wrote a little poem, and he said it was so mushy because it indicated how much I loved America, how I saw the difference, the distinctiveness of America that no other nation had. She said, I saw what was going on in Germany. He said, I went and found my old army trunk, and I pulled it out, and there was that little poem that I'd written. And he said, I took that poem and put it to music and gave it to Kate, and she sang it. And that was a poem that was sung that became a prayer. We call it God Bless America. Would you pray that after me now? God bless America. Land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with light from above. From the mountains to the prairie, to the ocean, white with foam. God bless America. My home, sweet home. Our Heavenly Father, we see that being blessed by you is not just pixie dust sprinkled down upon us, but it comes a result of us apprehending your grace, your love, and putting into practice your freedoms in this land based on biblical principles. Lord, we know on that basis you can bless us. Some here, Father, have been out from under your blessing because they've never received Christ. You have reached out to them and made it possible for them to have a new life, but they've never received that totally and completely. May this be that moment of decision when sins are confessed and repented of. And people right here say right now, I want Jesus Christ to run my life and give me a brand new life. And Lord, we know when that happens, that individual is always amazed at the freedom that suddenly comes. Others here are Christians. They need a church where they can worship and serve. Lord, may this be the time of decision in which they come home to Christ as Christians and be a part of this family. For this is our prayer in Jesus' name.